Good evening. Welcome to the Lion City Jazz Festival. This is our first Jazz Composition Symposium. My name is Chok Karong, and I will be the moderator for tonight's discussion. And I wanted to tell you more about what we're going to do tonight. The panel features acclaimed composers from all over the world: Thailand, Indonesia, United States, Australia, Singapore, Malaysia. So very diverse viewpoints and approaches to the art. So, as the title of the symposium suggests, we're exploring the consolidation, expansion, and the longevity of jazz, specifically in the realm of new works. And we'll be listening to our panelists play some of their music. We'll be talking about it, talking about their process, discussing what goes on under the hood of jazz composition. And I'd like to introduce the panelists for this segment of the symposium. On my far left, the leader of the Dizzy Gillespie Big Band and has been guiding us for the last few days, Mr. John Lee. And next to him is the very influential and the legendary Mr. Cyrus Chestnut. No stranger to the Jazz Association Singapore, in-demand composer, pianist, and arranger, Mr. Michael Verban. Also acclaimed composer and pianist and senior associate director, music director of the Jazz Association Singapore, Mr. Wei Xiang Tan. Last but not least, composer, pianist, and executive and music director of the Jazz Association Singapore, Mr. Jeremy Montero. I'd like to invite Mr. Montero to kick off tonight's discussion with some opening remarks.
Thank you, Karong, for the introduction. First, I want to bid welcome to Dr. Emmanuel Fernandez, Deputy Head of Mission and Consul General of the Embassy of the Republic of the Philippines to Singapore. Thanks for being here. Also, we have Miss Wendy Ng. She's here? Okay. She was supposed to be here, but I think she'll be along shortly, right? From the coordinator in public engagement and experiential learning from the US Embassy in Singapore. We'll see her soon, I think. And also like to welcome the chairman of the Jazz Association Singapore, Dr. Edmund Lam. And also our vice chairperson, Mrs. Susan Pei. Thanks for being here. So this week, the festival would not have been possible with our supporters, namely the Composers and Authors Society of Singapore, EFG Bank AG, the Cultural Matching Fund from MCCY, the National Arts Council, and someone who's been supporting us for quite a number of our Lion City festivals, the Hong Leong Foundation. How about a hand for all our supporters? So as Karong said, that today we are talking about the consolidation, the expansion, and the longevity of jazz. Actually, the title kind of was inspired by something Pat Metheny said in an interview a few years ago when he said that jazz is about consolidation, growing the repertoire, and so on and so forth, but also to expand it to include influences from all over the world. As you know, Dizzy Gillespie, for which this festival is created to honor, this year was one of the first people to actually bring in the influences from South America, from Brazil, from Argentina, and even like a night in Tunisia, I guess, was inspired by his travels to Tunisia, and so he was one of the first people to bring in other influences. And of course, later on there were more other influences as well. So basically, that's about expansion. And of course, you know, in Scandinavia, they have the influence of their folk music all over the world. And John Coltrane wasn't from Scandinavia, but he took a famous Swedish folk tune and came out with Dear Old Stockholm as one of his recordings. So the consolidation is very important. And also we want to see this music survive long after we are gone, right? So we talk about the longevity of jazz. So I guess briefly, that is really the umbrella of what is the whole thing about. And I will now hand back to Karong to drive the bus.
Thank you, Jeremy. We're going to begin by asking Mr. Cyrus Chestnut a question. Mr. Chestnut, you have played with some of the most important figures in music, Wynton Marsalis, Christian McBride, Gary Bartz, many others. My question is, how have your interactions with these legendary musicians and your time with them influenced your own compositional process, and how has that process evolved over the years?
How has my compositional process evolved by, you're asking, being by some of the great legends? Is that what you're asking?
And the tradition in general, how does it affect what you do, and how does it transform over the years, or how did it transform over the years?
Well, I like to think that I am a student of music. I continue to learn. When I finish learning, then I'm going to the jam session on the other side. I've seen great examples of some great people who are always growing and sharing their points of view. I'm reminded of a situation at the Blue Note with James Moody. And for some reason, he asked me about the interval of a fourth. I was playing something. He says, "How do you do that?" And I looked at him kind of confused, because I basically got the concept of playing this one pattern from him. For some reason, he decided that it must have been interesting, or maybe I was playing it in some different way, I don't know. So he's like, "Yeah, show me that." It's like, okay. So I played it, and he says, okay. 5 minutes later, he was playing the same thing forwards, backwards, and sideways. And he looked at me like, but it showed me that, he was willing to take in different points of view. Even someone like a Jimmy Heath, asking me, "How do you do that?" And I'm looking at it, says, "I got that from you." Going even back to Lionel Hampton asking me to teach him, to show him How High the Moon, when I felt that he knew it better than I did, because he was there when it was composed, most likely. But my experience is that they learn. They always are trying to understand a different point of view. And so if they're doing that in their up in age, in their twilight, then I've got a long way to go. So it's about always learning. And I believe composition, as life evolves, so does composition. So as life never stays the same, it always evolves. I believe the music inside of you must evolve too. And so, however I'm affected by life, hanging out with this guy here, telling me stories, and just being around Jeremy, anyone I come in contact with, I am influenced. And hopefully what you hear is the story of what I've seen and heard in a musical way.
One of the things you mentioned that really stood out to me was this idea of the grandmasters revisiting material that they know already and trying to find other ways to play the same thing. So it's not always about new material, but material that's been done before, done in a new way.
Yeah, I don't know if I have time to tell you my Betty Carter story. Do I?
We got to do it.
Okay. I will be very fast. I was in Emeryville, California. For those of you, I had the opportunity to work with the great jazz vocalist Betty Carter. And that was like graduate school, really, for me. One day I decided I was going to play the Miles Davis version of If I Were a Bell. Bing, boom, bing, boom, you know. I was going to play it just like the record. I thought I have achieved something great. Betty walked on the stage, and she looked at me, and if looks could kill, I would not be talking to you now. That particular set, there was nothing I could do right. She would tell me to play a C, I would play a C. She said, that's wrong. I could actually try to even give her a glass of water. She said, that's wrong. Okay, fast forward. And she says, Chestnut, get in here. And she asked me in a way that I have to say it this is the G-rated version, made for television and families for kids under 3. What was that stuff you were playing? I said, okay. It was if I were, and before I could finish, he says, I know what it is. I know it better than you. I was there. And he said, it says, with all due respect, you are trying to learn this stuff, but I don't have you here to play something that I already know. You're here to think. And if you have to play it, find a different way. That conversation changed my whole life. It changed my whole life. And so you talk about the elders revisiting and always, they're moving forward. It's always about forward motion. You can go through history. Music always moves forward. If it wasn't the case, we would still be singing and playing Gregorian chants. You know, music moves forward. And so that's what you have to do. Have to move forward. Evolution, it moves forward. You know, this is not 1930, 1940, 1950. This is 2024, right? I'm still wondering what day it is. I'm sorry. All right. So, time moves on. The music life moves on, and also the music moves on. So we have to do.
Thank you, Mr. Chestnut, for that. I'd like to move on to Mr. Michael Verpen, and I would like to. I don't think we've actually ever talked about this, so I'm curious as to how you came into this music and how this jazz tradition has influenced what you do, even though you work in many, many fields within music. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Thank you, Karung, for the question. I was raised in a Malaysian town 40 miles south of Kuala Lumpur. That's my hometown, Seremban. Some of you may know it. And Seremban is not a place where anybody knows anything about jazz. I was brought up to study classical music, but I have a first cousin, and he loved jazz. And when I was of age, I think 8 or 9 years old, he comes along and brings a record and says, Michael, you have to listen to this man. And it was Oscar Peterson playing with Joe Pass. And I heard it, I said, is that a piano he's playing? I said, that's not the way I know a piano plays. And it was just this amazing sound of Oscar playing with Joe Pass, and what is this? I said, you have to learn this. This is jazz. And I just kept that sound was in my head. But in Seremban, early 1960s, who's going to teach you jazz? Nobody knows anything. But my brother brought some records later, and there was a Stan Getz album, and he was doing a version of Jobim things, and So Danso Samba comes along, and my piano was actually a half step lower, and I tried to copy it and thinking, good grief, this is in G flat. And turns out to be my favorite key, I think, because I had to learn to transcribe by needle drop. And drop the needle and run to the piano. Forgot what's that note again? Ear training 101. And that was my influence, but it was like little drops from heaven. Like, it's very difficult to learn anything jazz, and so that's how, but that's when it captivated me. Just love that sound. What is that sound, you know? And so, yeah, from that point onwards, you know, it was the quest to learn jazz. It's completely by ear. And until I was privileged to go to Berkeley in 1980. And when sitting in class there, I said, I cannot believe they teach you this stuff. And I was smiling to myself, going through harmony, and said, oh, that's that thing. Oh, that's the thing. It's like light bulbs going all over. So that was briefly my introduction to jazz, how I came into it.
How does that foundation inform your artistic practice as a composer and arranger?
Well, following from what Cyrus said just now, it was ingrained to me from an early age that, you know, that every jazz artist strives to be original. So, you know, you can write stuff, and I guess all of us have one blues head that we know, but you know, it was always important for me to try to write something which was distinctly me. In the early days, it was me being a copy of Pat Metheny. It was me being a copy of everybody else under the sun. And finally, over time, just keep doing it, and, you know, you slowly evolve into a thing. But I also learned one thing that you also try to write. For me, writing a tune is essentially to try to challenge myself to play certain chord progressions I don't normally play. And so I write tunes that are difficult for me, but would grow me. So I'd be forced to handle certain changes. And I have a big influence in my life. This wonderful saxophone player, Salvador Guezo, who's passed away. And he used to tell me in his Malaysian Filipino accent, he says, and when he refers to the changes as corners, like driving a car, Pare, you gotta watch out for the cornering here. You gotta take this corner. I said, I know, oh wow, that corner, a half step lower. It's just corners. So my compositional things are just essentially to challenge myself to play things that I normally wouldn't play.
Thanks for sharing that, Michael. I'm going to move on and ask Wei Xiang about his experience. Could you talk about how you've evolved and how your priorities have shifted as a composer throughout the years? If it has.
Oh man, that's a tough question. I mean, that's kind of like assuming that I have a straight line towards anything in life, which I don't. Yeah, but I would say that as I get a bit older, I become a bit more thoughtful about process, about sounds, about beauty, about things that matter to me, much more than when I was 25 years old, right? When being better, faster, stronger was like, you know, what I wanted. And right now it's about chasing moments of interest, of beautiful things. I mean, that doesn't have to be like sweet and all, but I think most importantly right now, it'll be things that capture my interest, kind of like what Mike says, you know, like kind of forcing yourself to go through points, right, that you really want to explore more about yourself, your playing, your writing, so on and so forth.
It seems like there's a general theme about using the information that we have, and even though we might write tunes that are acoustic, straight ahead, maybe defined as straight ahead by some people, there's still room for self-expression, finding your own identity, interpreting what is beautiful, what is interesting, and putting that in your music without the use of any particular, I would dare I say, novel kind of technique. I wanted to ask John the next question, which has to do with, like I said, finding our own voices as composers. As someone who is directly connected to this lineage in this music, perhaps you might have a few words on the role that history and tradition plays in aiding budding composers who are trying to find that balance between being able to execute what has been done before and doing their own thing. Where is that sweet spot?
You know, composing is like improvising to me. You're sitting there with a piece of paper, you hear something, and it can be very derivative of something that's already there, or, you know, I don't think there's any one science about this. I once saw, I have this on tape, it's very old, from the 70s, an interview with Duke Ellington's son, Mercer Ellington. And Duke had the ability to hear something. If he could get his hands on the piano, he had it. So when the first electric piano came out, it was called the Wurlitzer. Remember that? It had little legs on it. Duke wanted one, and you know where he kept it? And he put it in bed with him, because he had ideas at night, but he couldn't have a piano in the room, so he didn't. But it would put the Wurlitzer piano next to him in the king-size bed where he's sleeping. And if he's laying in bed and said, oh shit, dum, 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 doo, doo, doo. And then go back to sleep. And when he woke up, he had it. Now, on the other hand, do you know the Benny Golson story? He's laying in bed and he goes, oh my God. Because he had what we called some jazz hits. You probably know the story. And he runs out to the piano and he's writing this down. And he said, oh my God, I got me another hit. Went back to bed and got up in the morning, couldn't wait to go to the piano, started playing. He said, oh man, that's Stardust. You know, I used to write a lot when I was younger, and especially in the Fusion days. I had over 80 songs recorded. Haven't done a lot in years, and then I did a reunion project with a guy named Larry Coryell, and Randy Brecker was involved, and Alphonse Mouzon, some of these guys that have left us. And I purposely didn't bring a song. I was supposed to bring a song. And by the third day, we'd practice all their songs, and I went to see What Is Not Here, and we didn't have a 6/8. So after they went to bed one day, I wrote a 6/8. And the downbeat said it was the best song on the album. It just came off my head. His roadie played a little guitar, so I said, play this riff. And then I started pretty much improvising until ooh, that sounds good. And that was the song. So I think we make it way more complicated. Yeah, I've seen Cyrus or Jarrell just play some stuff. And in my head, I'm like, when I've said to him, what is that? Did you write? And Cyrus said, well, I don't know. And I said, damn, we should be taping this, you know. You know, it's all improvisation. And then you're influenced by what you're listening to at the moment. I don't care what you say. You know, if you're into Oscar Peterson week, listen to a lot of, you know, that's gonna subconsciously influence you. Don't you guys agree? And if you're into Coltrane week, you know, you listen to whatever you're listening to. We're like sponges. The whole idea of, I'm gonna sit down and compose now. Yes, score paper and stuff. I don't know. I just do it, you know, but it's more like classical music than what we do.
You know, it's, I think Lauren Schoenberg said this best. Improvisation is like composition at a slowed down pace with an eraser, versus improvisation being composition at, I hope I said that right, at a rapid pace with no eraser. In both scenarios, the composer, if you had an imaginary piece of paper in front, and these days I'm going to say pen and pencil, I know that's becoming a thing of the past. The first thing you think of an idea. an idea, whether it's a rhythmic motif or something with melody or harmony, and then you script it on paper. And you write and you write and you write. And then if it works out okay, or you road test it, and it's like, okay, cool, I got it. You present it. So now, the improviser does the same thing, only at split-second tempo, real time. And so for those who might think, oh, you know, we as jazz improvisers, we just play whatever. No. There's thought, there's organization. Only thing is, if we play something that we don't intend, we gotta autocorrect real fast. And a lot of magic has happened, as John said. I sit at the piano and play something. A lot of times I'll just sit down and idea coming, I'll just start to play, and they say, okay, what was the name of that? I don't know. Come on, man, we need to run a tape player on you, whatever. But once again, it's that spontaneous thought. It's those spontaneous, magical moments. Some can be, can be written down, written on a sheet of paper and presented again and again. But actually true, if you think about improvisation, for the jazz improviser, we always have real time. We're always about creation, not recreation.
It's all, can I say one other thing? It's like, say Jeremy's down playing on Groove and High, and you play this great solo. That's a new song on the structure of Groove and High. James Moody's most famous song is a solo that he played on I'm in the Mood for Love. Incredible. I didn't realize this when I was young, what was going on here. I don't know, did you, Sherelle or Cyrus? There's a song Dizzy wrote, Tour de Force. It's an old song called Jeepers Creepers. Jeepers Creepers, doo-dee-dup, doo-dee-dup, ba-da-ba-da-bay-boop, boo-dee-dup, doo-dee-dup. There's Jeepers Creepers. So Dizzy was soloing over that, and one day he said, oh, wait, that's a new song. New song. And that's what our music was really based on. One experience I want to tell you that happened in my life, I don't even know if I told you guys. I think I told Sherelle this. I spent many years trying to teach my young son what improvisation was. I just couldn't get him to understand the form of the song and the freedom after the melody. And then I had a concert with Sonny Rollins one night. Now, Sonny plays the melody over and over. This particular night, he would play the melody, then variations on the melody the next chorus. We weren't getting too much chance to play. Then he played the melody again, then a little variation. He kept coming back. My son was about 12. He came in the dressing room like the clouds had opened. He was like, I see. He knew. I said, go. He spent the whole break in the room with Sonny, because he realized what the form was and what the improvisation was against the form. It was the most beautiful. You remember that, Patty, don't you? It was just unbelievable. His eye, he was like this. He had discovered something, what we were doing. And it was, anyway, it's all new songs in the way,
That moment you just described, I mean, personally for me, the first time I experienced being able to hear the form when someone is soloing, it's exactly how you described it. The clouds open and you can see. Yeah. You can see everything. And it just becomes clear what you need to do to move forward.
If you could have seen his face, and my wife brought him down to the dressing room, he was like, because I've been spending a lot of time trying to teach him this, but he got it. He said, oh, man. It was, anyway, so I know.
Thanks for sharing that, John.
Like, what is composition really? Classical composition. We always say in classical musician, the jazz musician's the composer. He's just writing down a solo. Beethoven's Seventh, that was the solo he heard in his mind, or so, you know what I'm saying? And the musicians are interpreters. They're not improvising at all. They're reading the notes. But we are always composing when we're improvising, right? just not necessarily writing it down.
I'd like to ask Jeremy next. Could you describe briefly your evolution as a composer before I invite you to play one of your tunes, so we have some context?
Well, I was, of course, classical trained as well, and 8 years of classical piano training, which was very good for me foundationally, and also to learn how to play the instrument that I love, the piano. But I love listening to all kinds of songs. I actually relate to John's story about Duke, because one time I was in Bangkok and I wrote this tune for Toots Tillemans, you know. And I said, Toots, I'm going to send you a cassette of a tune of mine. You know, I'd like you to listen to it, and maybe we can record it together. And then he said, give me a call. So I called him maybe 2 weeks later. He says, Jeremy, I recorded that song with Quincy Jones 20 years ago. And I had actually subconsciously remembered the song, and I thought I was writing an original
Yeah, that's
song.
a Benny Golson.
Yeah. So, but I mean, I think I write in different styles. So 1 minute I could be writing like a bebop head, or like later on I'll play something that was inspired by the style of Bobby Timmons. And another time, because I love orchestral classical music, I'll play like, you know, Life Goes On. It's a little bit like a classical minuet almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm a Gemini, so I kind of jump all over the place. So I guess I'm like a monkey when it comes to composition. 1 minute it's this way, 1 minute is very ballad-like, another minute it can be quite symphonic, like my latest album is symphonic jazz. So I just kind of jump, whatever comes in my head. I hear it in my head, and sometimes I can write it very fast, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but I always have to record it. I can't, I'm not like Duke was, you know, he just write and he remember the next morning, but I have to record it, because the next morning, if let's say I get a tune in my head in a dream, because some of my songs come in actual dreams, if I don't go and record it with some kind of recorder, the next morning I can't remember a note. So I have to wake myself up, go to the piano and record it, or else it's gone forever.
Shall we listen to Jazzy Bell's Shuffle?
Sure.
Ready?
So this is a tune that I wrote. Jazzy Bell is actually the name of a lion, a life-size statue of a lion that I painted and donated the life-size statue for charity. And it was, and I call it Jezebel because I imagined that this lion became animated and walked down Orchard Road. Jezebel Shuffle. And Tots is going to play with me. Tots Tolentino from the Philippines. So try and imagine a lion called Jezebel shuffling down Orchard Road. We didn't rehearse this at all, so good luck to us.
Jeremy, if you don't mind, maybe we could have a conversation with you at the piano, so you could show us. So you mentioned Bobby Timmons. Could you tell us more about how his music has resulted in this tune of yours?
Well, you know, a lot of the Cannonball stuff. A lot of the Cannonball stuff, and also Lee Morgan has this kind of shuffle, swinging beat, and this kind of minor blues kind of a feel. So I love the energy, and I love his solos. How he was just always just really nice and percussive, because a lot of people forget that the piano is actually a percussion instrument, and he understood that in a way that he got his tone out of the piano, and I just loved the earthiness, the blues, and so on. So this just from listening from a whole lot of stuff, that not just his records, but records that he played on.
Seems like rhythm is also a very important part of that feel. I mean, I'm not just talking about triplets, but where you put the triplets, things like that, seem to affect the energy of the tune in general. Could you talk more about the role of rhythm generally in your writing?
Yeah, I mean, rhythm is so much, just like in the jazz comes from the African tradition, and of course African American, but we have a lot of rhythm here in Asia as well, right? The Balinese rhythms and Indian rhythms and so on. So we grew up with listening to all these great jazz records, but also this music that we have, you know, from around us, from Malay music and Indian music, and so that sense of rhythm and syncopation is very important in the music, even from our part of the world. So I guess that's something that really speaks to when I write tunes. Rhythm is so important, as you say. You're right.
Would you mind, for the audience's benefit, could we just go through one of these passages?
You mean I have to read music? No, I'm just.
So you know, it's a shuffle tune. It's got a triplet undercurrent, but you also have the use of these 16ths, which give it a kind of a slippery feel for the melody, right? Dun, dun, right? Yeah. Yep. And also, basically, the balance of having those very strict on the beat 1, beat 3, beat 1, beat 3, and of 4. Which gives us the rhythmic cadence, right? It's like a reference point for everyone to hold on to. But thanks very much, Jeremy, for demonstrating that for us. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tolentino. I don't know where you are. Now I'd like to hear from Mr. Michael Verpen, who will perform his composition with you in mind. And then we'll talk about it. Yeah.
I messed up my own tune.
I have a lot of questions, but maybe I should let you lead it. What's the process behind writing this tune?
Actually, to be very honest, the inspiration comes from you. Chocorone. Yes, seriously.
I think there's a second part to this. though.
Yes, the second part to this. Like, so we are taking, say, I am actually draw influences from all over the place. And this particular thing, this tune came about as a result of you one day saying, you got to check out this guy. You posted on Facebook, said, listen to this guy. I love this playing. I'm such a big fan of his. I say, who's this guy? He's Sullivan Fortner. I say, oh, Sullivan Fortner. I said, okay, cool. So I went to go and check. I remember that posting you did. Your first posting was Sullivan Fortner. Anyway, never mind. So I went to go and listen to this album that you recommended. I said, oh, what a brilliant pianist. So fresh, so different, so new. I said, oh yeah, Kurong is always right lah. Kurong always gets it. He nails it lah. So, and then I went to listen, and then he had this piece called Aria, and it's in 3. I said, oh, so nice. Oh, this is, hey, 3 can be like this. So, prior to this, 3 for me was like a jazz waltz, bluesette, and that kind of stuff. I said, yeah, such an interesting 3. So I said to my drummer, Steve, hey, come, let's write this tune. I'll do a tune because we want to play a different kind of 3 other than, Someday My Prince Will Come. So I wrote this tune, and that's why it's called With You in Mind for Steve, for us to play together. So this is for Steve. Steve Nanda is a brilliant, brilliant drummer, and he's doing so well in Germany now. He's got his own album out and all that. So this is the inspiration behind it. So it started with you.
I'm gonna send this to Sullivan so he'll know. So he knows how big an inspiration he is to so many people too. Could you tell us more about the harmony though? Very interesting choices.
Yes. So the harmonies here were something different for me to try and write more with common tones. So at around about that time, there's this Glasper thing going around. So I say, okay, this is Michael Verhoeven thinking, okay, maybe I'll write with like Glasper and try and have common tones.
Do you mind demonstrating?
Okay,
what
for common tones like this, like.
That's not part of the demonstration.
Like this section here where. So E held over becomes from 3rd to a 5th. Stuff like that. But I didn't do a good job of doing a Glasper thing because Michael Verhoeven took over, and Michael doesn't do Glasper very well. But Glasper's a good, booster. That, think like that, and then you end up in your own space. So very much like I didn't do a good job of doing aria like Sullivan Fortner, and I didn't do a good job of being like Glasper, but I ended up sounding like me. So that's
what you just reflected on actually makes us all less nervous about channeling our influences, because by the time it gets through you, that I'm gonna say failure in quotation marks,
right.
is another kind of success, right? Because you have to be you anyway. So it's going to be translated.
Because otherwise I'm going to end up writing Stardust. and say, or Jeremy end up writing a Moody Tear or something, somebody else's song, but all the questions there.
No, it's not a question. It's such a beautiful thing. And I was wondering how many people have heard this song, because I've heard it. Because I played
Yeah,
your music. I played that song.
right.
So
Yes.
is this every time that everybody, is this the first time everybody's blessed to hear it today?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael.
With you in mind.
Now we'd like to invite Mr. Cyrus Chestnut to perform his original composition, Song for the Andes.
sir, I apologize for doing something in the same tonal center. I guess it just happens that way.
Yeah.
You know, sitting at the piano, and you could go to school and you can learn all different types of processes of how one chord tendencies and everything. And it's so easy to get caught up in just a whole bunch of nomenclature, of which at a certain point you have to kind of tell yourself, where's the music? Where's melody? What's the real story? How do deceptive resolution, or is it common tones, all various different movements, metric modulation, or all of this stuff, how does it help you tell a story? And so this piece, I'm sorry, it's also a D minor as well. My apologies. I guess it must be a D minor type of thing right about now. I was headed to Bogota, Colombia, and as I was going, I started hearing something different, and in a moment, this is what happened.
We were discussing this a little bit yesterday, and you were telling me about how the element of surprise, or
Yeah.
throwing a curveball in there, is important part of this piece. Could you tell us more about that?
Well, the challenge is to, as I was saying, you learn so many different processes, and it's very easy to write something and go on automatic. Okay. This first part, I guess, if for composition's sake, this is in AABA form, so to speak. I'm going to set this here. Stay with that. Now, at this point, I can, in more traditional sense, we basically just repeat that same thing. But I decided to make to do a transition. And this is going to be a transition here to get me to my next part with another theme. Then that's the other part of the journey now. It's not so. Okay. Now, at this point, in I guess the standard writing, there we go. We have our two. We hear that in our sleep, but. Yeah. So that's the effect. You know, and then so I've been trained to thrive on the element of not just doing the usual, and so misdirection and the element of surprise is something that I like. I like to kind of pull the carpet out, so to speak. I like to have the listener think, yeah, I'm taking you that way. Yep. And then at the last minute, you know, this is back home, we had a word what we would call psych.
Can I say one thing for the young musicians? Now, nobody's addressed this. This song is in 5/4, but it feels just like it's in normal 2 or something because of his compositional expertise. Now, can you play just the first part of the head counted off for the young musicians? That's very important.
Sure.
It doesn't sound like take 5, you know, bum bum ba-dum, bum bum bum, 3 4 5 1. It doesn't. It just sounds free.
So,
And
1, 2, 3,
how does that make you feel? You know how that makes me feel? The song is floaty. It floats, doesn't it? You hear that, Sherelle? It floats because of the 5. You know, it's different than the 3 feel. But it's not like you say, oh, that's in 5. It's just, why is that floating like that? It's because of the time.
Can I ask just one more small follow-up question?
Okay.
When you played it that time, I mean, we can't unhear what you said, so now we can really feel the pull towards the E minor 7 flat 5. When you were writing it, did you play the E minor 7 flat 5 and go, no? Or did you hear the C major straight away?
I heard the C.
Straight away.
Well,
Okay.
because I knew, you know, you learn there's certain tendencies, and so there's always, my middle name is Antonio, so and sometimes if I'm doing something, and sometimes it's good to be predictable, but I like to be unpredictable a lot. And so I get this tap on the shoulder. That's little Antonio tapping me on the shoulder, say, bro, don't you do that. And it's once again, it's that psych move. It's that psych move. You know, of course, the E minor, the 2, the E minor 7 flat 5, the A7 is what is expected. But so in your mind, you say, yeah, I know he's going to come right on back. And I said, no. I lead you down. I think you're going to open that red door. And I said, what happened? No, I'm over at the green door. So the element of surprise. And what happens there is this. Rather than it becoming predictable, now your energy is like saying, what's happening? And so if the listener it becomes engaged with what's going on versus the piece being something just in the background while you're on Facebook. See? So I can play something and you could be on your telephone. You know, we all on our telephones these days. I got you. And we're on telephones, but then you hear something, you say, oh. So in that moment, rather than just figuring out, now you send your energy toward what's happening. So as the musician, as the artist is putting stuff out, putting out toward the audience, now the audience receives it and sends the energy back. So, you know, that back and forth motion, that phenomena can be something really special. And so you live for the element of surprise. I want to keep you interested. Yes, sir.
When you got a piece like this that's in 5/4, another odd-time signature, and it's not recorded yet, and you're going into the session, what do you tell the bassist and the drummer?
I'll just play the song, and I'll tell them just use their creative license. And I think a lot of times the way how I play the song should kind of give an idea of what's going on. Not boom dang ding doom dang, but it's just the Andes, boo, a floater, a da lee da he da da ding dang, biddy day da ba do. Hear the dance, baby do do. See the imagery, a do do ba do da da, dash 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 do, boo ba ba do ya. And so, with creating that, how do you play? See, I could write it all down, but once again, if we're all improvisers, then we need to simply do that, bring one's ideas to the table. And as the collective is formed, then that's the result.
Thank you, Cyrus. Rest assured, we do have time allocated for questions at the end segment. But first, we're going to hear from Mr. Wei Xiang Tan, who will now share his composition, Lucid Dreams number 4.
Yeah. So I tend to write in spurts. So I don't write one. I write about like 12 songs at one go. And this is number 4, right? And I didn't have a title, so I just called it Lucid Dreams. It doesn't mean anything at all. And this is a very short song. Let me play the head once and then I'll perform it later. All right, and now I'm going to be performing it.
When you first sent me this, I looked at it, and immediately, I mean, these are my reference points. I heard shades of Ornette, Keith Jarrett, Charlie Hayden, Paul Motion. And then when I asked you, was that correct? And you didn't object.
Yeah,
So
probably.
could you tell us more about your dialogue with that tradition specifically?
Well, kind of like what John said just now. I think I was probably checking out that music then, and you know, it kind of like creeps into you by diffusion. Yeah. So this is like song number 4. Probably what happened during song number 1 to 3 was that I wrote something needlessly complicated and long, and song number 4 would be like, let me write something that is short and very, very, very simple. Yeah, so this is what came out. But the real complication actually happens after, right? It's on the phrasing, it's on about where the space is, right? And I really like this song. I've written this song maybe about 10, 12 years ago, and I played it with everyone. And it never sounds the same because like everybody goes like, what the hell is this? And I go, man, just play it. Eventually you will find something in the melody that will catch you, right? And then you go with that.
So in the chart it says it's an open solo / free. What are the systems that you use, if any, to govern the improvising?
Oh.
Or any suggestions? Any loose or rigid systems?
Not particularly. I wanted to give very, very simple markers, right? This is a question that begs an answer, right? Now we have a modulation. Why? I don't know, because I feel like it. Yeah, again, another unanswered question, right? So this whole thing is a guide to improvising whichever way you want. There's so many questions, like you can go crazy with this. Yeah.
So what different directions have you experienced? You said you've played this several times with different bands. Has it always been a different result?
Yeah. I've had like, the longest one I've played this with was like, I think at No Black Tie in KL, a wonderful jazz club that has since gone away. But anyways, I think that song lasted about half an hour. Yeah, this Poetry 12 bus. Yeah, but I've heard different versions of this, like from completely free to going straight into blues and so on and so forth. Yeah, and I'm not very hung out over this song. I don't claim that much ownership over it. So hey man, if you hear something, go ahead and play it.
Thanks for sharing that way.
Yeah.
We have a bit of it. As promised, we do have a bit short time for audience questions. And if you're watching us online, you can leave a message in the live chat or comment section, I think, on YouTube. Are there any questions from our live audience? For any of our panelists? Oh, I'm just a facilitator, so.
Check 1, 2. I just wanted to congratulate everybody for being around these great composers. And as we talk about composition, Mr. John Lee was talking about the improvisation being like the main impetus of the music, if I get it right, and vice versa. And I was glad that Cyrus brought up Betty Carter, because in the continuum of things, I know we're talking about composition a lot with the academic side of it, but on the spontaneous improvisational side of it, where we use, for myself, I don't write that many compositions, but I know part of improvising is compositional work, and I wanted to to acknowledge these gentlemen for bringing that out, and wanted to ask Cyrus, did a lot of Betty Carter's improvisational thing stretch you out to help part of your improvisational and compositional continuum in music as an influence?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure.
Absolutely. That time is,
But even the way you sang the song, I could hear an element of her.
Yeah.
When you were describing the 5/4 song and
Yeah.
the way you sang it,
Mhm.
I could hear that that thing, and I mean, because that was like a very heavy time of Betty Carter stretching out with the vocals, and
I mean, she pushed the envelope, and of course, again, she would always say, "You're here to think. See, you're not here to play something that I already know." And I couldn't go on automatic. That was not allowed. Once again, if I didn't see her eyes glaring at me, I had little Antonio tapping me on the shoulder. And I think even to this day, little Antonio is still being sent by Betty anyway, tapping me on the shoulder, So the music moves forward, and yes, she required us to think. There were certain
Forward.
things. There were certain things that were in the DNA. It had to swing, but once again, we weren't. It wasn't enough just to play it like what was done all before. We had to learn how to play the music for now, and even now, as I go and research things, I have to figure out how I relate to it now, and play the music for now. I don't wear a pork pie hat. I don't say, "Hey, Daddy-O." I'm here right now, so what does
this ain't no
the
regular
music.
gig.
Yeah, what does it mean to me right now? And I gotta play the music for now.
Thank
And use and in that, now the last thing I just say is, at the end of the day, music is music, and a groove is a groove. I grew up with Shirley Caesar, but Shirley Caesar, James Cleveland, But then in the cupboard was Wilson Pickett and King Curtis. So all of that is a part, in addition to Beethoven, Brahms, and all, and they're all a part of who I am. So evolution, you ask? It's like, okay, trying to figure out how all of that makes me who I am.
The different juices, this sponge soaked up, it stays there, makes us.
We have time for one more short question, and then we'll take a break. Yes.
So I was thinking, we are in this very fluid, ever-changing, landscape. In this time, at this point in our lives, where there's so many changes, and one big change would be the phenomenon of artificial intelligence and technology. So I just wanted to hear from the esteemed panel, what are your thoughts on the impact on the future of jazz, on things like AI, on ChatGPT, on other platforms that can actually compose, and we know that technology can only improve, so rapidly. What, in your view, would be the impact on jazz, on the future of jazz and creativity with this phenomenal rise of artificial intelligence? So this is the first part of the question. And the second part would be what you think people like all of us, and as individuals, and also as institutions, for example, Jazz Association Singapore, can do to sort of ensure the continuity and the genuine presence of jazz on our planet. Thank you.
Let me ask ChatGPT Well, John, maybe you have a response to that.
For AI with music, that makes me go, I'm glad I'm old. I don't want to see somebody take John Coltrane, Ornette Coleman, and stir them up in some hard drive and say, let's see what comes out. That's the most boring shit I've ever heard in my life. I mean, oh, excuse me. I don't know what the uses in our music is, and I know they've been trying to kill this music for a long time, and it just gets bigger and bigger. You know, all different forms of it. It's the most creative music in the world. It allows for human expression like no other. I always teach, I don't teach a lot, but I always tell the kids, they want to know the difference between classical. I say in classical music, the composer's the creative one. He's the improviser. Jazz, everybody's the improviser. So you can't get more creative than that in a music, can you? Everything else is interpretation, so.
Can I take a stab
Reading.
at this?
Yeah, go ahead, please. I'm sorry.
So many years ago, there was this piano technology where you could program the piano and the piano would play by itself. And some hotels say,
You mean like a player piano?
Play a piano, that's
Okay,
right.
yeah.
And some hotels said, oh great, I'll buy a piano, stick this thing in, and I don't have to pay a pianist. And wherever they stuck it in, people stayed away. Because the spookiest thing you want to see is a piano playing by itself. And
Yeah, that's a bad dream.
And thinking somehow that entertains you. There are certain things humanity requires. And making music is one of those things that humanity requires to be made by a human. There's only so much AI can do. And I guess AI is creeping in the area of writing, taking music and putting into your video or your TikTok thing or whatever, yes. But live music is by definition played with live musicians. I cannot imagine that as a human being you would sit down there and say, hey, you know, wonderful, I'm going to listen to a computer entertain me for tonight and improvise. I guess technologically it could, but it leaves you dead cold. And just like going and eating fast food or eating your mom's cooking. So certain things have to be made by human hands. So in the field of jazz especially, it has to be made by human hands because of the spontaneity, the very nature of it. Because I cannot imagine that jazz, AI, an AI program could ever endeavor to warm a human heart. So I really am not afraid of that. But I'm afraid for those of us who are also in the production line, music production, composition, arranging, etc. That's where it's going to have a tremendous impact. But in terms of music industry, and this question comes up a lot, especially when people say, why bother to go to school? There are two aspects to the music industry which I think are very AI safe. One is live music, and any kind of live music. And the other is music software. If you write AI programs yourself for music, I guess that's a good future for you. But to answer your question, jazz, nah. I don't think. It's going to end up like that, those player pianos.
Yeah, that word, you know, you said that word, artificial. Yeah. Artificial, okay? Not real, artificial. And even if you think about a program, it's somebody else's point of view. And we are all fearfully and wonderfully made. We all have a point of view. And like I said, if it's only just one point of view, then we can, if it wasn't, well, then we might as well go on back and just do some Gregorian chants. You know? So really, in many ways, yeah, you have a marketing plan and people want to be, say, oh, this is economically whatever, but at the end of the day, it's nothing like the human being. It's nothing like the human mind. We all have a story to tell. And it's a story for somebody, whether we can tell it directly to them or whether it can be recorded for someone in centuries later to hear. we all have a point of view. We all have a purpose. We're placed here. And so, artificial, give me the real thing.
Thank you all for your questions. At this juncture, we'd like to take a short break and regroup for our second half. Second half of the symposium is called Expansion. We'll see you in a few minutes. Thank you. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you very much. We'll be back in about 10 minutes. Thank you. Thank you all for waiting. Just give us a minute or two and we'll be getting started. Welcome everybody. Welcome back to Lion City Jazz Festival's inaugural Jazz Composition Symposium. Thank you all for joining us. I'd like to briefly introduce our panelists for this segment. Of course, no stranger to us now. To my left is Mr. Jeremy Montero, pianist composer, and executive and music director of Jazz Association Singapore. Next to him is one of the most important musicians in the Philippines, being a leading session musician as well as operating in the forefront of the jazz scene, saxophonist and composer Tolentino. Today we also have the privilege of having Mr. Sunny Ratana from Thailand join us. Mr. Sunny Ratana is a multi-award winning composer and pianist. And next to him, recognized as rising star on the alto saxophone by Downbeat magazine, and also winner of the ASCAP Young Jazz Composer Award, all the way from the USA, joining us for a week of teaching and playing and concerts this weekend, Miss Sherelle Cassidy. Next to her, a pianist and composer who is also similarly decorated for his recorded work as well as his live playing, Mr. Sri Hanuraga from Indonesia. Lastly, on my far left is a saxophonist, composer, and interdisciplinary artist, as well as head of the School of Contemporary Music at LaSalle College of the Arts, Dr. Tim O'Dwyer. Similarly to the first half, I'm going to be asking our panelists some questions about their artistic process because we want to know how they got to where they are now. Mr. Tolentino, can you describe your compositional process and what elements outside of straight ahead jazz you have incorporated into your original work?
Hello. Yes. I come from a background. Well, I was surrounded by different types of music, mostly rock and roll. You know, I was digging Led Zeppelin and all together with people like Paul Williams, Neil Sedaka, and later on I got into jazz. So that kind of assimilated, combined. You know, so I don't really have the tradition for the straight ahead jazz. You know, I'd love to, but I feel like I've been brought up in a different environment. So that's like a reflection of what I write. Most of what I write is from, you know, just like improvising, and maybe I come up on an idea and just like work on that.
Do you recall any point in your artistic life where you decided that there shouldn't be any pressure to write in a straight ahead style, even though that's what you were checking out? Was there any of that kind of pressure ever?
Well, when I was in school, you had to do that. You know, you had to. You were surrounded by people with a tradition, which I unfortunately didn't have, and I dug it. But you know, sometimes you realize you just don't swing, you know, in that way. You know, I like. Different music, you know, and it's nice to really combine that whatever I got from that tradition with the other sounds, other genres, stuff.
Do you consider that the jazz tradition to be perhaps the foundational, the core of what you do as a writer, or is it not?
Oh, it is an element, and I still strive to get to that point. But then I also have to embrace my roots, whatever that is. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Mr. Ratana, what about you? What have you incorporated in your music that people listening to it might consider it outside of straight ahead jazz, even though there are elements of all those things?
For me, straight ahead jazz is foundation of jazz, right? If you want to play jazz, you have to know swing. You have to learn bebop. It's a language. But after that, when you learn the foundation, you try to find your own way, right? I listen like everybody said, McCoy, Herbie, or Oscar Peterson, or new generation like Glasper, Brad Mehldau, everything. And I also love like funky music, gospel music, everything rock. I grew up, I listen like Dream Theater, or every kind of music. It's my inspiration. So finally, when I listen everything and practice a lot, and you will find your sound. And every time that you compose or when you play, the audience will know who am I, something like that. Yeah.
With the benefit of hindsight, and I think there are some budding composers hopefully watching us online or watching us live now, how long does it take to unify our influences and create something that's uniquely ours? How long did it take you to get to that point?
I don't know, but it's hard to tell. But every time that my student listen to me, so it's sunny, or it's hard. It's hard to tell how long, but I don't know.
Well,
but it's getting BU and better and better. Yeah.
Would you say that it's a slow process?
Yeah, slow process.
Okay. So we
Cannot be like 1 month, 1 year. Yeah.
Right. Patience is key, right? Thank you, Sunny. Ms. Cassidy, I'd like to change it up a bit and ask you something similar, but with a bit more nuance. Is reconciliation with the jazz tradition an important part of your process? Alternatively, with the benefit of hindsight, maybe you could tell us how your creative process has evolved over the years with regards to your personal relationship with that legacy.
Yes, thank you. That's a good question. Well, I grew up with many types of music, starting with my father, who played classical piano, and he also played jazz in New Orleans for 10 years. He was a Hammond B3 player, a piano player. And so I heard, growing up, classical, jazz, and then my mom loved funk and R&B, so a lot of James Brown, a lot of Michael Jackson, Otis Redding, Tina Turner, which is kind of funny for someone coming from Oklahoma. But, and then we moved to a town that Garth Brooks was from, and I had a stepdad who loved country music. So I have an acquired taste for country music. But what I love is that all the music tells a story, and all the music comes from the music before. So with jazz, which is, not only to me the foundation, but a continuance. I don't think there's a jazz period and then we're out of jazz. Even if I turn to, the pop station, KR 103 or whatever it is, there's elements of blues, there's elements of improvisation, even if it's a little riff or something. It's, you've got the same compositional elements that come from classical music, jazz, it's music. So what I was trying to do with my Electra project was find out who I am in the music now, and really draw from all the influence I had growing up and all the influence I've had since I was a teenager, and into, going from Pearl Jam to Beyonce, you know, because even if we don't listen to that music ourselves, it's on the street, it's in restaurants, it's everywhere, you know, and you can love it or not, or accept it or not, but it's music and it serves a purpose. All music serves a purpose. So I was trying to find a place that felt modern, and you know, Michael brought up in the last panel Robert Glasper. I went to school with Robert Glasper, and then I went to school with Jonathan Batiste, you know, at Juilliard. I went to school with musicians who were playing very modern and playing the sound of what was now, you know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And, well, we're talking longer than that, but we're not going to talk about that. So I was really inspired by that. I was inspired by hearing players like Robert Glasper play something that really sounded, you know, like a lot of the modern music I had heard, but still had that strong tie to jazz, you know. And at the same time, from my own perspective, that's not 100% me, right? So with this album, that's really what I was going for, is to try to get closer to that and explore just another side of, in my opinion, jazz, just a today jazz, and figure out who I am musically.
Would you say it's I mean, just hearing you talk about your influences and what you heard growing up, it's almost a reconciliation with your childhood, the sounds that you heard when you were younger, and the formal training as a jazz student? Is that what's happening with your electric project? Is that an accurate description?
My formal training as a jazz student was way before I was a jazz student with my dad. So it's all in there. It's all a melting pot of what I grew up with and what I experienced along the way.
Right. No strict chronology.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah. It's
gotcha.
all melting pot. It doesn't really have a lot to do with school. It has more to do with relationships and the people that I've met and the music that I've heard and that sort of, and humanity. Yep.
Mr. Hanuraga, how about you? How has your practice evolved over the years to its current state as a composer?
Yes, I started with a lot of tradition, a lot of bebop, like from Bud Powell, and then McCoy and all those guys. And then what important for my development as a composer is actually my relation with another kind of art also. Like, because there's this art center in Jakarta where a lot of the best artists for the contemporary art is happening, like dance, performance art, or even painting, all kinds of like literature that really influence how those artists create their art. That really influenced me. And also continental philosophy is really important part of my development as a composer. So yeah, I would say Adorno and Gilles Deleuze, especially Gilles Deleuze, French philosophers, really changed how I think about music. Because when I read one of his essays called Geology of Moral, up to that point, how I create music is always intuitive, like trying to express my mood. Like, so it's kind of illustrating the mood. But after I found out about this essay, in that essay, Deleuze is explaining how lines is evolving from geology, from stones, and then gestures becoming animal, and then larynx, like sound, and then becoming text. So it's really interesting for me, like, what if all these things that I read, actually I just what if I'm doing a sonification of that, instead of like doing a representation of that with sound? So that's where spectral music technique came in for me, in order to sonify like those ideas. Yeah.
Thank you for that, and we're going to hear a little bit of that once we play the song that you're going to share with us. I'd like to ask Dr. O'Dwyer about his experience. Was Straight Ahead your initial foundation, and how did it, if yes, how did you go from that to what you do now?
Thanks, Carl. Ah, here. Two. One, two. Oh, that's good. Okay. Yeah, I started playing straight ahead and then getting into college. I mixed with some people. I grew up in a country town in the middle of Victoria in Australia. And I was just fortunate to have a couple of good music teachers that exposed me to jazz. I'd learned piano, I did all the piano things, and then I started to play saxophone, and then that was the beginning of a kind of a very visceral relationship with the instrument. And so I started to explore, I started to just go towards the sound of the saxophone, I guess, and really get enamored by it. But then when I got to college, I was into cannonball, I was into like really trying to play the tradition and learning how to do that. And I still do, I actually really still aspire. I think it's just one of those things that keeps you searching forward in terms of getting better and just emulating, or just, it's always out of reach, that stuff, which is a great thing to practice and to have in your mind. In terms of my own then developing your own kind of way of doing things and the way of making music, I was, again, lucky enough to kind of have some mentors when I was at college that sort of almost took me out of college. They weren't part of college, they were just people who I met through people, and particularly this one guy who was a violinist, and he was really into ornette, and he really embodied that music. He wasn't a jazz musician necessarily, he was a pop musician. There was a lot of pop guys who got into ornette, or that was their way into jazz. In Australia, I know that was the same in America, but he then really, we used to spend hours just in a junk band, just rehearsing and playing free for hours and hours. And I remember that beginning being just so exhausting and so punishing to kind of continually create new things and melodies, and in a free way, inside, outside, anyway. And it took me months to kind of even get the capacity to sort of sustain that type of level of concentration, to not just play, but listen, stop, all of the things that we're learning. But it was a very intensive thing that was outside school, but it was just every week. We actually didn't do any gigs. We just played and played and played. That was pretty formative for me. And then at the same time, and I guess these stories are about following paths, but also being open to things. Like I was always kind of really open to stuff. And something else came into my life, which was contemporary classical music and contemporary classical composers and the European tradition and all that. So that's kind of the point where I started to get into extended techniques and learning, and then learning compositions, which really those compositions really teach you how to do those extended techniques, because you have to do it at that dynamic, at that rhythm, and if you're practicing those kind of compositions, it's a great way to learn those things. And then I went into really free, and then I went and studied with Evan Parker, for example, in the UK, who's the first generation free improvisers from the UK tradition, along with Derek Bailey and all of that crew. So that got me into that, and then into Europe, and I went and studied in Europe and explored all of that. And from that point on, I think my process is kind of operating and developing languages with improvisers in a free context, coming up with compositions around certain ideas that enable us to play in a structure and improvise at the same time. And then it just goes on from there, it's all an improvisation. Like I love the fact that you're into Deleuze, because that's what my PhD was on. And I was just sitting there going, whatever we're saying, I was just getting nervous, going, how's what I'm going to say going to fit into this? And then he just started talking about Deleuze, and I went, oh, great. So Deleuze is also a big influence on me too. And we might talk about that later. There's lots to talk about there. But yeah, so these, and what you'll hear, the piece before we'll talk about when we get to it. But it's a combination of those things, and it's actually based on the fold. So you'll know that the piece that I'll talk about is based on the fold, the book. Yeah, I could talk, but yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Dr. O'Dwyer. We're going to start off with this music segment by inviting Mr. Tolentino to play one of his pieces now. This is entitled Naman. And assisting us will be Mr. Wei Xiang Tan on piano. Could you tell us more about this song, how it came about, what you were thinking of?
Well, then I sometimes record melodies on a recorder, and I repeatedly sang these melodies in my head, and I was like drawn to the sound of like a Wayne Shorter, maybe a Eric Satie, film music, and stuff, and I that dissonance, I was trying to get that real nice dissonance and lots of space in between, just to create a certain effect. Naman is a in slang. I don't know how you translate that, but in slang, it's like, come on. Like, come on, come on. So it's like, I was trying to create that mood. Come on, come on. Come on. I hope that's clear.
The solos, I mean, you described it as quite free, when we were talking about it. And it says here solos on F pedal.
Yes.
And generally, where do the solos go?
It'll go anywhere. It's like, it's when we do this with the band, it's going to be like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the harmonic concept with Ornette. I do something, and you follow me, and if he does something, I follow him. So it's going to be ears open. So it'll change with a different player, different band. It'll always change. Yeah.
I think we need to hear it. Yeah, of the improvising.
Of the improvisation.
Yeah, and how it would go.
So when I play with somebody else, it's going to be different.
You said that you were sort of inspired by film music. Could you elaborate a little bit on that? Because this does have.
Yeah, it's also short, and sometimes.
Like a cue.
Naman, there's this old Filipino comedian. And he was always the slapping boy, like people would do stuff to him, and he would just go, naman, naman, naman. And I just remembered him and his expression. His name is called Babalu, if you remember. And I remember his expression, and this just gave me that feeling. So I put naman. Mm-hmm. Because they push him around, all of a sudden he goes, come on, come on, come on, come on.
Grumpy, a little grumpy. All right.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you.
Thanks for teaching us the meaning of Naman too. We're going to now play a recording of Mr. Ratana's, and then we'll talk briefly about his process behind this song.
แกงไก่มัสมั่นเนื้อนพคุณพี่เอ๋ยหอมยี่รารสชุนเฉียบร้อนชายใดบริโภคพุนพิษสวัสดหวังนาแรงอยากย่อหัดคอนอกให้หวนแสวง มัดสมา
So I understand this is a poem that's about 200 years old?
It's a poem of food and dessert composed by the King Rama II.
And could you tell us more about this poem, what it's about, and the
About food and dessert.
Right.
Masaman, you know masaman, right? Masaman is the food.
So they're talking specifically about dishes.
But the word, it's very hard to understand, even me, because it's like a poem. It's very old word. Yep.
Okay. What made you decide to set it to music, and what was the process like?
The singer is Nat. Nat is she has a Thai. She has a foundation about the very Thai traditional, so that style. So even me, I cannot, or just who train to sing like that in like a Thai music with, Thai music, right? Is there lanad, or I have no idea about that. So when I work to compose the music for this poem, so just me and Nat, and she sang the melody, and I try to catch the note, what note is it, because it's some notes very specific, and what do you call it? No, something like that. It's very hard to tell. Yeah. Yeah. Just me and her first, and then just put the harmony. That I love. Yeah.
You have that whole recording where there are a number of actually it's all Thai songs, right? All the lyrics are in Thai.
Just a part of the poem, not the whole poem.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So maybe there's a 9 part. I just put only 3 parts. Like that.
But when you were thinking about producing the project, what made you want to create this particular combination, piano trio and traditional Thai vocals?
That's the expandable. That's it, because we are jazz musician and I'm Thai, so I think I should bring Thai music to the world, right? It's interesting, and our tradition is very unique. So Western people, they never heard like this. So that's my job, I think. Yep.
Did you find that were there any challenges reconciling the two idioms, so to speak, jazz trio and that vocal style or the lyrics?
Like I said, it's just me and her first, so it's easier, and she's jazz singer too, so like she's in 2 world, Thai world and Western world, so it's very easy to connect. So just if she sing like this and I ask her, it should be that note all the time, something like that, and she explained yes, and I cannot change the note, so I have to follow very strictly. Yeah.
For the benefit of all of us here who may not be familiar with the tradition, these the melody wasn't written by you, right? It's a song, right?
No,
it's an original melody.
It's poem. It's the way of Thai poem. Masaman, gang, gal, that's like that.
So these melodies don't come with chords, right?
Yeah, I just put the music.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Got it. So how would you expand on this concept moving forward? Now that you've done a whole album of this, right? What would your next step be? What would be the next step in the evolution of
next step?
Yeah. What would you do? What are you considering?
I don't know. I just do my best. That's the first album of me and Nat, my trio, and her. The second album, it's big band. Me and her. So I try to do many things, but second album we brought it's called Luk Tung. Luk Tung is another kind of Thai music, but this one is very Thai traditional. Luk Tung is another way. It's like a country music, American country music. So it's Thai country music. Yeah. So
That's
just
that's
do
the
my
next,
best.
That's the
Yeah.
next project.
Yeah.
Okay, we're looking forward to hearing that. Thank you. Thank you. All right. At this point, we'd like to invite Miss Sherelle Cassidy to perform Evolve. And we have one and only Mr. Cyrus Chestnut to assist us on piano. I'd like to start by asking a general, open question. Tell us how the tune came about and what you were thinking about.
All right, well, on the recording, I played through guitar effects because I wanted to understand, or to experiment with that, really. But, so it's a little more electric on the album. But the album is called Evolve. This tune is called Evolve, and I wrote it around the time in America that Trayvon Martin was killed. And coming from Oklahoma, being female, in America there's so many double standards, not just for women, but people of color, of every type. And I was just so tired of this happening over and over, and people without repercussion, and so I just wanted us to evolve to a place where everyone was treated on a human level, that we were all humans, that we were all treated equally, whatever we were. And so the first part is a blues. It's funky, but it's a blues, a minor blues. And it's in 7, so it has kind of a flow to it, but it's got a little roughness to it, little bounce. But that's the first part, and then the second part is coming from the more modern, I guess, Glassberian, influence. But you know, it's like pop music today is generally 4 chords. It's a formula. So I used basically 4 chords, but a reharm of that in the last 4 of every section. And it's kind of just a cry of hope and a cry of hope for change, you know, and that was really what the song is about. It starts with an intro on the album, a spoken word intro by great vocalist Christy DeShiel, and she, you know, I play flute over it kind of freely, and there's a vamp, and she speaks Martin Luther King's speech for I refuse to believe in the hopeless midnight, you know, of racism, and so she speaks the words of Dr. Martin Luther King, and then we go into the tune Evolve, and it starts with the bass alone, playing that vamp, and then the keyboards come in playing that vamp, then the guitar comes in, so it's kind of built like one person after another, and if each of us keeps supporting each other, those of us who believe in this keep supporting each other and believing in this and fighting for it, then one day it will happen.
I really appreciate how all the elements in the recording, they're realizing something that's outside of the music. It's more of your ideas about how humanity should evolve. Sorry, you had something to add?
Yeah, it's a story.
Yeah.
So all of my music, when I write, it comes from something that happened, a feeling, a place I was in, a situation. Every song that I've written has been a story, and it started with just a simple little idea, you know. And a lot of times I laugh at myself because I'm sure people think I'm the crazy lady in the suburbs now of Chicago. But I'll get an idea. And you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, do, dee, doo, 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 doo. You know, like I'll be singing this into my phone, and people are just looking at me, going by. But you know, just getting a voice recording of it so that later I can hear it, but so I don't forget it. So when I get to the piano, I can really just flesh it out and make the song that I was hearing.
In terms of the process, when you get these ideas, is it a result of you thinking about these issues, or is it more like you hear the idea and then it seems to represent what you're feeling?
Exactly. I hear the idea. It actually tells me what I'm feeling.
Right. So it
In
tells
so
us more
much
about
of music.
ourselves.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Would you say that like in singing the glass period
You got a microphone there.
yeah, that you described the glass period section or the 4-note thing or the reharm, it's sort of like a reward for maybe ascending to the consciousness of that you were.
Yeah.
It gives you like something to look forward to, a step ahead from the original thematic march of the thing. Would you say that?
I say that's right on point. Yeah, that's exactly it. And you know, you all didn't hear the end of the tune, but that's exactly what it does. So we all take solos, but like Cyrus, I don't like to be predictable, right? So at the end, instead of having like sax solo, trumpet solo, guitar solo, okay, whole head out. No, at the end, in the piano solo, it just stays in the vamp. After they play the blues, it just stays in the vamp, and we cycle that feeling. And it gets higher and higher and higher, and then it's this energy, you know, it ends with this big, you know, amount of energy from this more current section, this happier section. It's a reward, yeah.
It's like, come on, everybody, yeah.
That's exactly it. You got it, yeah.
I was just wondering.
Thank you, yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Cassidy. Now we're going to invite Mr. Hanuraga to play his piece, When Billy Has Bounced. If it's okay, maybe we could have a conversation with you at the piano. Do you have your microphone? I'll get it. I'll get it to you. So I think a lot of us are familiar with Billy's Bounce. And obviously the rhythms that you're using is Billy's Bounce, but the pitches are mapped differently. So could you tell us more about that, how it works?
Yeah, so the original inspiration is from all this post-colonial or subaltern thinker like Dipesh Chakrabarty or I don't know, Homi Bhabha about third space. So I'm trying to have a liminal space that is in between bebop language and Javanese gender. So gender is like this metallophones from gamelan. And what's interesting about gender is I just figured out this last 4 years that it has very similar ways of working like jazz. Like they basically improvise on progression. And also like jazz, it has like very complex rules in improvising. That's what's interesting. And also it has like really rich overtones. And then in order to work out, like to blend like these two worlds, because of those exposure with the post-colonial thinkers, that it made me aware, not just to put the attribute of my tradition just inside. So it has to be, it has to blend, and it has to be like a completely new language. It has to become a system, not only like a quotidian practice, everyday practice. Yeah. So that's where the spectral technique comes. So spectral music technique is this technique where you use like sound spectra of a sound, the spectra of a sound as for pitches, for harmony, or to generate rhythm. And in this case, I'm using the sound of Charlie Parker. So the sound of Charlie Parker, it has these overtones. So this is actually when Parker blows his saxophone, we are hearing this harmonics actually. And then for Gender, it's like. Yeah, so this, and then so there's two like Gender and Parker, and then there's a technique called interpolation in spectral music, so it creates a gradual change from one sound to another. So it becomes, it's kind of like, how do you say it, voice leading going to another place. So it becomes my new harmonic system. And this new harmonic system, well, I basically just transpose all the bebop language. I literally transpose a lot of bebop theme and also lines from Parker, Mobley, whatever.
I'd like to expand on that a little bit. You said you transferred some of the bebop language into this new system of yours.
Yeah.
Would you mind showing us an example of that kind of translation?
Yeah, for example, maybe on top of my head, there's this lines from Remember, beginning of Hank Mobley solo. So so there's this arpeggio and then like this scalar movement going down. So the arpeggio over Parker's will be. This. So I will play. And so on. Yeah, that's for example. Yeah.
It's pretty incredible. Wow. That deserves a round of applause. Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
Hello? Yeah. So like when you have the overtones of Charlie Parker, how do you actually connect them scalically?
Scale-wise?
Yeah,
well,
because like you talked about arpeggios. So how do you connect them by scale?
Look, the chord is actually the modes, because I just put them together. If I put all the overtones close together, it becomes this. So if I then I could transpose many things to this. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have one last question. Oh yes, go ahead.
I mean, if somebody else wants to. Does that make you happy? Like when you do that, I mean, it has a kind of touches you like in a humoresque type of way.
Yeah.
Like Thelonious Monk music sometimes.
Yes, actually, somehow it reminds me of Monk. Yeah, and maybe of who's this clarinet player? With playing with Coltrane. Eric Dolphy. Yeah, right.
So it kind of it has it generates happiness.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it seems to like where you went into so like a whole tone like checking yourself. Did I really come from that?
Yeah.
You know, it's like you wanted to stabilize your dream world, like and like to say. You just left that happiness world playing all it, but the overtone series and stuff, and the two worlds together, and then you made it really calm down with the other section.
Oh, the ending. Yeah.
Yeah. So were you trying to forget, in theory, that you had played the previous?
Okay.
Maybe I'm stretching out.
No. Actually, that's a nice point. There's one point about this. Actually, the beginning and the ending is just really Billy's Bounce transposed into this. But the first transposition is transposition based on scale. The last one, so I have like system transposition based on scale and transposition based on like spread out harmonics. And the transposition spread out harmonics actually creates those. Yeah, actually the point of also like at this point, like the goal of me being creative is also actually I'm asking what is creativity. Because we human like in this modern era like we want to control everything. Composers want to control everything. And then the point is of all my recent works is to let go all the controls. I don't have controls at all. It's just like the information. It's really what subversive inside of Parker's. That information is already there, but with the recent technology we can read it now. With spectra and everything. Yeah. So it just coming out of it's what's hidden within the already within the information itself, within Parker itself. I didn't create anything in that sense, actually. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
I think one key takeaway I got from that was the idea of making sure that when you blend it, you can't cut it into two again.
Right.
You can't separate the two. It's indivisible. Yeah. Right. Now we'd like to move on to a work of Dr. Tim O'Dwyer's. This is the Folds project. I'm going to play a video now. right.
Running out of time.
There are a few things we can zoom in on here.
Sure.
The circular breathing, the unusual instrumentation, but I think I want to talk about the element of co-composition which you were sharing with me the other time. I think that's the first thing we should talk about. How did you create this?
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing. So the context of this is, and I guess I pick up on some of your work as well, or the inspiration of things for some of my work, not all, but it is about metaphors, it is about context, and mostly actually for me it's about who's in the band and putting a band together, not unlike if you could hark back to say how Ellington would compose and put like really special people or interesting people. So I kind of try to do that like when I'm in groups like this. So the context of this group, this was in Cologne a few years ago, and I was doing a residency, and part of that residency there was actually to reach out and make a work that involved different people within the music community, and particularly those two musicians. They were Iranian musicians, and they were also, the Muslim musicians. The clarinet player is a classical player who doesn't really do a lot of improvising. And the tuba player is a jazz player and a free improviser. And so there were people that had a lot of different backgrounds in there. And so then I was very interested with The Fold. The Fold is kind of it's a book by Deleuze, Gilles Deleuze, this continental philosopher that we were speaking about before. And within that, there's a passage in it about accords and about perhaps many different ideas coming together and being woven together for a kind of a universal accord. And that really kind of inspired me to come up with this idea where I prompted, there's 5 pieces in this whole work. That's just that work goes for about 15 minutes. And basically the inspiration, I had 5 key words. I had the past, the future, above, below, and the present. Okay. And so I just gave them the words and a bit of a background. Nothing really, just sort of what would the past mean to you? Would it be tradition? Would it be something that happened in your past, or something that happened yesterday, or just very general metaphoric things. And each of them composed a melody. They composed a concept. Some of them were words. Some of them kind of just different kind of musical ideas, which I then arranged into pieces. So some of the melodies became bass lines, some of them were in 5 or some in 7, and I put them into grooves. I put them on top of each other sometimes for harmonies. So all different ways. And when I got all of the material, I arranged it very straight through. Like I just arranged quite quickly and put it together quickly, like in improvisation. I didn't kind of think about, this is going to work or whatever. And then in the rehearsal period, we worked through the material, and so that's why it's a bit kind of angular in the sense, we sit in different areas so people can expand and improvise in, but then there's other areas where heads come in just very abruptly and so there's kind of that element of surprise throughout it. But for me it was like a sense that what happens if you're in a group and everybody's composing? Like I wanted to do this collaboration with different people. So you can kind of do that by researching their like Iranian music or the music of Dodje or the percussionists or classical music or whatever, and try to write something. But what happens if you get them to write something and it's quite personal to it? It had to be kind of personal, like in a way, like what is your present? Or these words would kind of they could be abstract, but they could also be kind of personal. So it was about having those voices on the paper as much as their voices improvising at the same time. So there was a very obvious flavour of all of their musics in the entire work. Yeah.
Did you encounter any compatibility issues, or did you just ignore it? What was your approach?
That's a really good question. So not so much in the composing. There's always great moments like that where you kind of juxtapose, and some of those worked. And so, as I said in rehearsal, I kind of made a couple of little adjustments and decisions to kind of make it a bit smoother transitionally. But what was interesting was actually how everyone phrased. Like, Carl, a clarinet player, who's actually one of my oldest friends. I went to college with him, but he now plays with Music Fabric, one of the great contemporary classical ensembles in the world. And his phrasing is so razor, like there's no real swing in his playing. Like it's so razor sharp, where the Dote player is one of the most poetic, lyrical kind of players, and it's very, very expansive and flowing the way he phrases. So between the two of those guys, it was like it wasn't like, oh, let's rehearse until we get it. It was much more about conversing about how we wanted to play it. We recorded this, it became a record and release, but listening back on things and where we came in and out, how we were swinging in certain extents. We were all swinging differently, and how do we resolve that? So that was through conversations, and it's through kind of collective. Where do we get to there, and being aware of it? Not having everyone sort of hold their line so much as kind of listening to kind of try to get it together.
So there were some rubs, just
absolutely, yeah.
In the interest of time, we're going to open up the floor for 2 quick questions, but thank you very much,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Dwyer, for sharing that with us. Any questions from our live audience for anybody? Comment, question?
It was just that you were successful, making everything a family, like it's supposed to be.
I have a question for Dr. Taylor. Was the arrangement of the musicians who sat next to who, did that have any impact upon the outcome? Juxtaposed,
Yeah, no, that's a good question, and it's a while ago, so I can't remember whether I really thought through that aspect of it. There would have been thinking about that, but I can't remember. I think we had the maybe it was. I'm just looking at it going, maybe the bass, because I was baritone, alto, tuba, the basses, and then having Carl and the Dojo player together, and then the percussion in the middle. Basically, that was because it's all linear. It's all linear instruments as well. There's no chordal instruments. So I think that was kind of the thinking behind it, really, sort of to orchestrate it like that. Yeah.
Sorry, I have one more question. Technical question for Sunny. When you did the production and you had the vocal part, was there how much pitch correction did you use to suit your trio? Because it sounded very perfect. But my understanding of ethnic music is it's not equal tempered. Well, it's not part of the well-tempered scale. But your recording sounded really true. Did you do a lot of pitch correction, auto-tune?
You mean the singer, right?
The singer's part. To match your harmony.
We did not use any auto-tune, just everything natural. Like I said, she's both world, so she knows Thai very well, and she sings jazz very, very good too. That's why she can handle it. Yep.
So did the fact that she is singing in pitch-corrected jazz tuning, did that change the sense of the lyric in that it wasn't pure non-tempered
I used to ask her about this, about every pitches that about the Thai, can we transcribe it, something like that, and she said yes, but I think depends on the band too. Sometimes when she sings with the very traditional band, maybe I think it's different key, something like that. Maybe this key is C, maybe they play in B flat sometimes. But in Thai music, maybe just they play only 2 keys about the tuning. Yeah.
Because I did a transcription once for Jeremy, and we did a Indian song. Yeah. Yeah. And it was, the pitching was very true to that genre of music. But I thought Jeremy is going to have heck of a time trying to play on piano for that tuning and make it sound the same. But you did an excellent job. It sounded really good.
Yeah, thanks to her. Yeah.
Well, we've come to the end. I wish we could go on forever, but we don't have that much time left. So I'd like to invite Mr. Jeremy Montero to close us out.
Oh, the beauty of how this thing sort of evolved and become something that I didn't expect, but still so wonderful. The way all your contributions for both panels, both of you, all your work and your creative energy and the love that obviously flows from your compositions as well as your performances. So on behalf of the Jazz Association Singapore, all of us are so grateful for your contributions on both panels, and hopefully that we'll be able to do this again in the future. And I want to just close by saying that the intention of doing this symposium, inviting all the ASEAN musicians, is for us to start to play each other's material. Besides playing the American songbook, playing our own originals, I really want to see us all, a tune of Mike's on my set, a tune of Kerong's on his set, and just to get this cross collaboration going, because I think music's the language of love and music is the language of peace. So let's see that happen. Okay? Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you very much.
That brings us to the end of the Lion City Jazz Festival's inaugural Jazz Composition Symposium. We'd like to thank all our panelists, Mr. Jeremy Montero, Mr. Wei Xiang Tan, Mr. Michael Verpa, Mr. Cyrus Chestnut, Mr. John Lee, Mr. Todd Stolentino, Mr. Sunny Ratana, Ms. Cheryl Cassidy, Mr. Sri Hanuraga, and Dr. Tim O'Dwyer. Thank you all so much. Thank you.